Hello, thank you for being with me today and welcome back from summer break. For most of us, we are returning to City View, and for the other half of us, we are new to City View. So for some, this will be a review, and for some, this will be an introduction to the background. We're going to be looking at the overview of the data at City View Elementary School. Something to note about our school and to remember is that we came from Riverside Intermediate. We were 2nd through 5th grade. And during the year of the pandemic is when our school took a transition. We became City View Elementary School, kindergarten through 5th grade. We experienced new zoning, new structures in the building. The lower primary grades are more of an importance in the school now, getting used to that. And also, acquiring new furniture. So the whole school took a facelift during the year of the pandemic. So this is kind of exciting to see the data. With that being said, our intentions for meeting today is to collaborate with each other, the 3rd grade team. We're going to look at an overview of the school with the available data for the past 3 years. We're going to observe student achievement data. We're going to highlight some strengths and weaknesses that we notice, discuss areas in need of improvement with English language arts and math, and lastly, we will ask questions amongst ourselves to derive an action plan. While we're looking at the student achievement data, some things we want to be thinking about. Do we truly understand the current state of achievement in 3rd grade? If we want to be meeting these areas of the CCRPI score, are we meeting students where they're at and getting them ready to be successful in the next grade? We'll also be comparing those assessments and results to the state and the district along with the Georgia milestones for 3rd grade alone. And then we will look at our own portal at Cobb County's required interim assessments for 3rd grade. And we'll be looking at that in comparison to the school, the region, and the district as a whole. Is the change in the community learning environment contributing to the score? So as we know, we're going through gentrification. There is new zoning. So we have some instances where the neighborhoods are cut off. One half of the neighborhood goes to the primary school and the other half goes to our school now. And on top of that, uniforms are no longer required, and we know that social emotional aspect can also play a part in a child's learning. While looking at the data, what areas are not distinguished that need dire improvement? Is there a trend in standards that are consistent, whether it's successful or challenging? And where did students show the most proficiency? Were those standards given more time for application and reasoning? And is there a noticeable difference in instruction? Are the strategies used being consistent? Are we all following through with the instructions we had set on our strategic goals? On this slide, we can see the student enrollment at City View Elementary School. For these 2 years here, we were still 2nd through 5th grade at Riverside. And for this year, it's reflecting the kindergarten through 5th grade. On this slide, we have the teachers at City View. So I thought this was interesting to note. During the years here, we were co-taught classes. And for 2020 to 21, we were single taught. And the years of experience for the teachers has increased. What you cannot tell on this graph, though, or any data that we could pull, is how many teachers are leaving and returning the next school year. So unfortunately, that is some data we do not have to base off consistency for the students. Looking at this graph shows us just a little visual to kind of understand what was happening at City View. So our certification levels were higher in bachelor's. We had a few more people had a specialist degrees and doctorates. but our years of experience was averaging from 1 to 10. And then down here in 2018, we received less people in the specialist program. However, more people were attaining their masters, and the 11 to 20 years of experience was starting to grow. So it's interesting to see the rollout there, and this is from 2020, but just last year we had a bunch of teachers graduating with their masters and doctorates. However, another thing that's not able to be graphed or showed on here is teacher certifications and endorsements within Cobb County, but is not reflected for their payroll. Looking here, we can see the race and the ethnicity of the students at City View. In 2017, we're going from 1,366 students to 1,282 to about 1,043. So we can see it predominantly is Black and Hispanic and stays about the same. And this is the school as a whole. And next to that, we have the race ethnicity of the teachers at City View, going in the same order, 2017 to 18 to 2020. So we can see more of a change in ethnicity through the years here. That's also something to think about with the majority of the students being Black and Hispanic, and now we're starting to acquire more Hispanic teachers and getting that diversity in the building with adults. They're receiving the same support and comfort with knowing they share the same culture, same language, and same type of understanding. Here is the attendance at City View for the same years we've been looking at. On this side, we can see the amount of students, the number of students, also reflected down here. And over here are the percentages. So we can see in 2017, our number of students was somewhat adjacent or parallel to 5 or fewer days absent. And over in 2020, it is increasing, which is that because of the pandemic. That could be something. And then our 6 to 15 days was going up and now back down, but it's also in somewhat comparison to the number of students as well as the chronic absenteeism. However, that gap has gotten smaller. Looking here at our subgroups, we can see the amount of 5 or fewer days, 6 to 15 days absent, or more than 15 days for limited English proficiency. So we can see more than 15 days has increased during the 2020 year. Students with disability, it started going down, and it actually has increased. So that is good. Students without disability, I thought this was kind of shocking to see that here, yes, compared to students with disability. However, students without and students with disability are about the same level, amount of days at school. And then we have our economically disadvantaged. So this is just about the school as a whole, 99.8%. Right. Then we have some student retentions. In blue, we can see 2018 and 19. And in red, we have from 2017 to 2018. So this is still 2nd through 5th grade, and this shows a tremendous drop in the change of rigorousness, change in curriculum. So that's something to look at. What was done differently? We had more students retained in the following years than we did in 2018. Looking a little bit more at the demographic profile of City View, the amount of students in percentages in the early intervention program. So it has decreased. However, our English language learners has increased. And then the same pattern is showing somewhat for special education and gifted learning. I thought this was an interesting way to look at this. If we can, in blue, it's showing the early intervention program, the percentage of students in the program, and then comparing that to the percentage of students that are English language learners. So moving forward, we want to know if they have an EIP, we want to make sure, are you putting the English language learners' language goals, making sure we're keeping up with the data and putting that into CCSD. All right, as we finish up some of the background of the school, we are going to also compare the enrollment to third grade. We have a visual here showing how much of third grade took up the enrollment of the school. So another thing to note too is here we had about 26 to 28 staff members on each team. So that many teachers on the third grade team with almost up to 30 kids per class. And now it's one teacher with maybe 20 students in a class, if even. This is another way to look at the enrollment of by the gender. Some people like to mention about too many boys, too many girls. So we do want to make sure moving into the following year, we do have the same just about half and half ratio as it is consistent through the years. It's not too far off as it looks here. We can come down here and see we're only about 10 off of males and females. So if we look here at this data, this is something else to note too, especially with the amount of students in third grade going from a large capacity to a smaller number, that 3%, well, first here we have our Hispanic and our Black population. They're flip-flopping their percentages just about every other year. And then in that 3%, it might seem like nothing, but however, this is a big change with thinking about who is the minority and their living circumstances. And so where they are the minority outside of their community, they are now the minority in the community. And another look at the community outside, with gentrification, we're starting to see more of the white ethnicity coming into the building, which there used to be none of. Here's another slide we can look at to see the student enrollment in third grade. And the way it's broken down here, as you can see, just in like 2017 and 2020 somewhat reflect the same data. The enrollment date and the end enrollment are about the same. However, you're not seeing that big chunk of students that are withdrawing and then re-enrolling during the middle of the year. And also, how many of those students are returning, how many of those students are new. All right, so now we're going to start talking about the CCRPI components. That's the College and Career Ready Performance Index. And that gives us 4 different components that we are assessed on. And here's a review of how it is weighted in percentages. So as we look at the scores for the 2018-2019 year, I want you to be thinking, are we getting students where they need to be before they leave elementary? We always ask that question, so we need to see, does the data prove it? Looking at our scores here, we can see for content mastery, we did go up 2.3%. And that is showing a reflection of the trend in retention rates if it continued the same into the 2019 school year in the content mastery has gone up. The progress, the growth of our students compared to similar academic students, we did decrease in percentage, so that's something we could be diving into. Where are we lacking in that aspect? And then closing gaps. Did we make improvement on the targets being met? Yes, we did. We did an awesome job showing an increase of percentages there. And then for readiness, providing the authentic experiences for students to practice, we only went up 1/10 of a point there, but that's still an achievement. So down here, our 2018 score gave us a score of 62.6%, and in 2019, 66.7%. So although we did increase by 4.1%, we are still below 100% overall. This is another way of looking at our CCRPI scores. I thought this was interesting, looking at it in this form of shape and then putting the numbers there. This looks tremendously bigger, but then when you look at it with numbers, it's not that far off. So it's interesting, in 2018, 2019, and moving up to the years that followed, a lot of our concentration has been on math and English language arts, and sometimes it flip-flops. English language arts will be more of a focus than math. So it's interesting to see the number of content mastery they performed on here and how it's comparable to the science and social studies. On this slide, we can see City View Elementary's 3rd grade English language arts performance on the Georgia milestones for the years 2017, 18, and 20. So you can start to see here that our beginning learners started to increase some here, and our developing learners started to decrease. However, our distinguished learners was increasing, which would have showed great gain. However, we hit the pandemic, we did learning online, and this was a result of it. So not too bad. We still have a sliver of some distinguished learners. We still have a somewhat good portion, about 8% of proficient learners, and then we have less developing learners than we do beginning learners. And then looking at compared to math, we have less beginner learners for math now this recent year, than we do developing learners. We have proficient learners, however, we do not have any distinguished. And before the pandemic hit us, we were showing great gains with developing and proficient learners and distinguished learners in 2018. On this slide, we can see the performance of the students on the Georgia milestone that showed proficient and distinguished in English language arts. So if you notice the trend in 2017-18, it looks like we were gaining or increasing in our performance there. However, so was the county and the state. But we were somewhat maintaining the same amount of rigor that we had, increased it along with the what was being compared. And then in 2020, you can see everyone took a downfall. No one was at halfway. So they also decreased in their percentage of proficiency and distinguished learners, but so did City View. And something else to think about is that going to be a part of, we have less amount of students testing in 3rd grade who could have performed on proficient and distinguished learning. We have a lot of students who are still being trained on phonics. Could that have impacted the score? Will we see a difference with them receiving phonics and are building as we know, it used to be an issue with Riverside Primary. Will this increase? Will we see more consistency bring up an increase in the scores? All right, so now we're going to look at this slide that is showing the percentage of the performance of students on the quarter 4 English Language Arts interim, and this is the assessment that is mandated by the Cobb County District. So this is something that we're going to use to dive deeper in for 3rd grade to see where in the reading are we falling short that we can improve instruction on. So each student in Cobb County is expected to take this interim for English Language Arts and Math, and it is done in the month of May or the last month in each quarter. 7 standards are addressed within the subject, and this is done for English Language Arts. It was done with 10 items. Some items, there could be 2 items per one standard or 1 item per standard. If you look at this data, you can see that it is similar to what we just noticed with the milestones on how they perform with beginning learners, developing, proficient, and however here is showing a higher of distinguished learners. But then again, this was just done with 10 questions. Compared to the South Cobb region, we are still lower. And then the region is lower than what the district is showing as a whole. But the district, we still, with distinguished and proficient, are not meeting the halfway point, which is what was reflected on the milestones. So that can show some true validity. So we can see here that 128 students were tested, and we see the 7 standards that were assessed. Keeping in mind that there were 10 items, 10 questions that they had to answer, so the red is showing us these are the students that answered the questions incorrectly and did not show proficiency on those standards, and in green is coded for the students who did answer the question correctly, and they are considered distinguished. Now the blue line shows us the average score that the students received for those standards. The ones that are hitting the top of the green are most likely the questions that had only 1 item. And then up here is where we have 2 items, so it looks like more students are showing less mastery, less of a true distinguished mastery. Or is it done in a constructive response where they are not well equipped in that area? So this graph is a visual way of showing where students need improvement in instruction. So here we can see this is an extremely low amount of distinguished learners, and most students need help in this area with the reading, language, or literary, 3rd standard. But this has more than 1 item, so where is the deficit? Along with the reading foundational skill is also more than 1 item was used. But here we have only 1 item being used, and most students are scoring with the distractors. So here we have the standards that were listed on the graph and then in more detail written out. The one standard that the students did score pretty high on is not considered a priority standard, so that is something to think about. Are students receiving more instruction with certain standards? Where could it be relocated? Our foundational one, identify and know the meaning of the most common prefixes and suffixes. This could also be and part of vertical alignment with second grade that is touched on at the end of second grade and then followed through with third grade. How well are we bridging that gap from grade level to grade level? And then we have one of our lowest performing standards at 39%, and it was only one item done, is to distinguish their own point of view from that of the author of a text, as well as looking at RL3, 55%, describe characters in a story, their traits, motivations, or feelings. And I pointed this one out even though it's higher than this one because of the data we will be looking at. This is also pulled as a screenshot from Insight Education where CTLS is used, the Cobb Teaching Learning System. So here's another screenshot pulled from the reports. Here we are seeing RI6 where students distinguish their own point of view from that of the author of a text. This is a informational, it is a depth of knowledge is a 3, strategic thinking, where students have to analyze. This is a multiple choice question, so only 5% more students chose the answer C, so the distractor is clearly answer B. And then something to think about, the students are economically disadvantaged. Does this play a role in their limitation of resources and being able to get that experience and perspectives aside from their own? Here's another standard we're going to look at is RL3. This is a multiple choice question. This is only depth of knowledge 2, skills and concepts and understanding, and the majority of students chose D at 77%. But if we compare that to RL3 done in a constructed response, and it is brought up to a higher depth of knowledge with strategic thinking and analyzing, we now have a lower performance in the students. So here, with the possibility of 2 points, this is done with writing. Most students did score well with writing for using the linking words. However, when it comes to explanation, this could be a big factor in it. Are they able to explain their actions and how it's affecting the sequence of events? Another thing to think about is the rubric. A lot of us are familiar with writing rubrics, and they're not always extremely detailed and clear, so are all teachers scoring at the same type of rigor? So now we're going to transition over to math. We're going to move a little bit quicker because these are the same type of graphs that we looked at, so we can go straight to looking at the data. Here we can see City View in blue, and similar to the English language arts, we are below. Cobb County is higher than Georgia, and Georgia is higher than City View. However, the comparison from Cobb County and Georgia is much smaller of a margin as they continue, and especially in 2020 to 2021. So this makes sense why the school focused a lot on math recently. It's more of hands-on experiences and not as able to provide that concrete material for students to use when we were doing an online learning. So here we can see the same graph used before with the English language arts. It's done with the math. It's also addressing 7 standards, but this time it's done using 17 items. And here we see City View compared to the South Cobb region compared to Cobb County as a whole district. So something to note here, our distinguished percent of learners was actually increased more than the region. However, the region has more proficient learners than we do at City View. All right, here we can look and see which priority standard needs more improvement within the instruction. So again, we have a percentage of this, what was scored by the students, and the 7 standards that were addressed. And this was done out of 131 students. So if we look right away, we can see the lower areas where students need more instruction or practice is with geometry, some extra practicing with measurement, which can go along with geometry, and then we have our numbers and base 10s. So that is a big difference, as well as here. So it seems like something is not coming over with them from 2nd grade. This is also from 21 to 22, year 2021 to 2022. So this is an effect of them being in the pandemic in 2nd grade, moving into 3rd grade. Where are the areas in deficit that they need help? So again, looking here, the average score that was performed by the students, taken from the screenshot from CTLS. And then we have more item counts for these questions on the math test. So for the more questions about fluently adding and subtracting within 1,000, students are receiving a lower score. And that is going to also affect them fluently multiplying and dividing, as well as consistently solving 2-step word problems. So if we look here at MBT2, the majority of students scored, 49% of the students scored correctly. This is a multiple choice question. And you can see that the distractor is letter C. This is the other one to look at. The students here, the distractor is letter C, and 47% scored incorrect. Unfortunately, the item analysis has been disabled, so we cannot look at the exact question and see what the difference is or what exactly the students needed help with adding and subtracting within 1,000. So we can look and see, is it the strategies that they're using? Are they understanding the operation and how they coincide with each other for addition and subtraction with their relationships? Or are they having trouble with regrouping tens or hundreds? So again, we can see with the same standard address, this is now showing us it's still a multiple choice question, and the depth of knowledge is a 2, compared to here we have the same, it's still a 2, skills and concepts. But the students showed a much bigger difference scoring with the correct answer opposed to the other question. However, we cannot analyze the item. So as we start wrapping up, we want to think about some strengths and weaknesses that we noticed from observing the data. Some strengths that I jotted down were that the teacher education levels are increasing. We are making progress as a whole school with closing the gaps and increasing our CCRPI score. The student retention rate is decreasing based off what was available. And we are showing a higher development with language standards and linking words, and that is great for wanting to exit kids from the ESOL program. And then we also have smaller class sizes now, which is going to make more of an impact on instruction, especially with personalized learning. Some weaknesses that were noticed is that the data does not reflect the teacher endorsements and certifications. There is a high turnover rate for students and teachers, which is not always reflected for the teachers in the data as well. Attendance is a large contributing factor to student readiness. Having the student become responsible for measuring their progress in math and reading with data notebooks. And the student experiences, their limited background knowledge plays a big part in their application of learning. Here we have some questions that we will discuss. What could it look like to promote teachers' educational efforts in the building? Meaning, what it looked that we could provide recognition for their commitment to learning, and also it's working as an advertisement to teachers of less experience to seek them out for help or assistance. So beyond just having the degree, what endorsements and certifications did these teachers earn through Cobb County that they can provide of support to less experienced teachers? Student transiency is difficult to manage. We cannot control the students and where they live. However, how can we provide an environment to keep the consistency of educators in the building? That is one type of constant structure that we might be able to have control of, is what can we do for teachers to be wanting to join our school and come into our doors and be part of our team? Are there any new ideas for promoting attendance that does not fault those who are absent due to measures beyond the student's control? And we know that attendance has always been an obstacle, so we're constantly looking and striving and thinking for more new ideas to promote attendance to get parents also involved at getting their kids to school on time. How can we ensure that students and teachers are following through with measuring their progress? In what way can it be done authentically to be meaningful? So remember, if the student sees themselves growing, they're going to be more adamant about creating their own progress and reaching their own gains and goals. So are we being consistent with the data binders? How can we make it more authentic and not just fill it in and put it away? What are some ways we can increase student experiences to foster growth in math and reading? Are students exploring, experimenting with STEM challenges, or participating in project-based learning? Something we can think about that is before the pandemic, we used to have clubs. Students would sign up for a club they were interested in joining and learning more about, or spending more time practicing that hobby, which centered around educational learning. We also used to have science nights, math nights. These are something, how can we bring this back and receive that still community, family involvement, and it be done appropriately with the new guidelines for COVID? Is there other data available to obtain and analyze? Are these standards the same weakness each year? So we want to keep thinking, what do we know, what did we do, and what can we do better? So what we're going to do next is we're going to discuss those questions at your table and then share out as a whole group some of your thoughts. And then as a team, we're going to develop an action plan to address the weaknesses noticed in the data from the previous slides. Think about short and long-term goals, what is reasonable and attainable, and what strategies or resources can be implemented and how will they be assessed. So please keep in mind of the norms you created as a team to follow through with them. And thank you so much for your time. I know I took a lot of it and I appreciate it. Thank you.